shit.
Welcome back to the Mantry podcast. I'm Reggie Milligan, a co-founder at Mantry. The goal of this podcast is to help you cook better. And we choose audio as the format to teach you because everybody's busy. It's tough to squeak in time to pick up a book or even cruise blogs on the net. You know, just listen to this for 10 minutes while you're driving to work, while you're cleaning the house, and we guarantee over time, if you give us 10 or 15 minutes a day, you're going to learn how to cook better. So today's topic, we're talking about the Mantry guide to throwing a kick-ass dinner party. Now, what is a kick-ass dinner party? A kick-ass dinner party is about having your friends, your family over and making sure they have a good time, but also making sure you have a good time. And that's something that's always underlooked. Most people who throw dinner parties actually get stuck in the kitchen sweating and stressing, such that they don't even really enjoy it, and they might never throw one again. So we've thrown a lot of dinner parties, and we want you to kind of learn from the mistakes. And there's a couple tips that you can pick up that's going to make your life a lot easier. So let's dive into them. Okay, first things first, 3x the ice. This one's dead simple. I mean, everybody has been to a party of some sort that ran out of ice. Simply buy 3 times the amount of ice that you think you're going to need. People go through a lot. They use it for cocktails, to chill the wine, whatever. Ice is cheap. It's annoying to run to the store in the middle of a dinner party. It's really, really, really gross if everybody starts drinking like cocktails with no ice in them. Everybody's been there where people are drinking vodka sodas and there's, you know, 1 ice cube floating in there or it's lukewarm. So 3x the ice right off the top. Just buy 3 times the amount you think you're going to need. Number 2, this is a really subtle tip. Have couples sit next to each other, not across. Now, back before Mantry, I had a startup called Social Feed, and we threw big long table communal dinners. And by communal dinners, I mean a bunch of people who didn't know each other sitting around the same table. And one of the tricks that we found over throwing, you know, many, many, many dinners is that when 2 people come together, if they sit next to each other, it opens up the table to conversation. Whereas if they sit across from each other, they might as well just be sitting at a booth, just them two at dinner. They're going to talk about their day right across from each other. Whereas if, like I said, 2 couples sit next to each other or couples sit next to each other, it opens up the table. And what you want is conversation. And what you want is inclusion. And I'm telling you, it's a simple trick. Just say, yo, if you came with someone tonight, make sure you sit next to them. You don't even have to tell them why. It helps. Number 3, set an odd time for arrival, like 7:10 p.m. This is a trick I actually picked up from an amazing article that GQ wrote once called GQ Hosts. And I think it was Alan Richmond who was the food editor. And as soon as he said this, I understood what he was talking about. But listen, like 6 o'clock or 7:30, people don't take those times seriously. But if you say something like 7:15 or 8:45 or 8:50, watch the magic happen with people showing up on time. Nothing kind of screws up any type of social gathering like people showing up over the span of, let's say, an hour. So pick a weird time and people will tend to respect it much, much more. Like I said, 7:15, 8:50, whatever it needs to be. But people are much more likely to show up on time if you set an odd time for arrival. So number 4, braising is your friend, searing is not. This is a crucial tip. And this is an example of like what this podcast is all about, which is like, this is simple theory that just by knowing this little tidbit of knowledge, you're going to avoid major disaster when it comes to actually cooking and in this case, throwing a dinner party. Something like lamb shanks or braised short ribs and red wine are great because you can throw them on, you can cook them for 3 hours, you can put them in something like a Dutch oven, and when it comes time to actually serve, your period of time that you can bring that to the table, I mean, you can span that out over half an hour, 45 minutes, because something that's braised will keep at its sort of optimum performance, so to speak, or its plating time for a much longer window. Whereas if you think about something like seared scallops, you've all seen this, is like people who are trying to do too much for the dinner. And let's say they start searing scallops and you have to do it a la minute, and like everybody's sitting around the table and you're rushing and throwing scallops in a pan, and you're all stressed out, and you want to stick to things like, even if it's pulled pork tacos, or even if it's a great stew, beef bourguignon, something like that. Like, these things are meant to be thrown for a large amount of people because they're low maintenance when it comes to serving time. Don't pick veal scallopini, or trying to sear off, like I said, scallops at the last second. It's just a potential disaster. And the goal, remember, is to hang out with your friends, and you want to choose a main that you can prepare and plunk down with minimal hassle, so you can actually do that. You can just go up to the table all smooth, totally stress-free, put down your lamb shanks, put down your stew, and be like, dinner's served. Number 5, interactive wins. So the only thing better than braising short ribs and lamb shanks or whatnot is pick something that's interactive. This is super subtle, but it really brings the table to life. Like, something like tacos is so great because you can lay out a bunch of ingredients and people can customize, and they can start like saying like, oh, you got to try it with a little bit of sliced radish, and then I put a little bit of pork on there, and I put this sauce on it. And if you lay out like 8 or 9 or 10 simple garnishes that people can kind of customize, kind of like what Subway does, like, you can pretty much add whatever you want to the sandwich and everybody can make it their own. That's a really fun thing to get going at a dinner table. And this just doesn't have to be for dinner. Like, a great trick for brunch is like a bagel bar. Get a bunch of great toasted bagels, hold them in the oven, and then you lay out like different types of smoked fish, like, or smoked salmon, a couple different types of cream cheeses, like a bit of capers, red onion. You could put out a great almond butter so someone could smear a little bit of almond butter on their bagel. But it creates a sense of interactiveness at the table. For dessert, sundaes, you put out a couple types of ice cream, a couple different types of nuts, a caramel sauce, a chocolate sauce. I'm telling you, like, the food becomes the conversation, and it's a very powerful way to throw an awesome dinner party. And people let their guard down when they start having food that they can manipulate and play with their hands. It's a subtle tip, but like, versus everybody kind of getting their own plate of something that's been pre-plated, it's way more fun to have something that's interactive. So number 6, mix up the guest list. This is another one that I think is pretty much derived from that GQ host article, but I loved it, so I always want to include it. And I've read a lot about dinner parties, and a lot of this is just little tidbits I've heard from around, but I'm trying to consolidate it all into kind of one simple list. But take liberty in inviting guests who don't all do the same thing. So as a general rule of thumb, artists, doctors, and anyone who likes raw oysters makes great dinner party guests. And what I mean by that is, like, anyone who likes raw oysters, for example, they're adventurous. Okay, they're not going to have like a lot of food. You don't meet a lot of people who can knock back raw oysters and then are really, really, really picky about food. Okay, you want people that are like open, that don't have, aren't these types of people that like, I don't eat tomatoes and I don't eat this and I don't eat that. There's allergies, sure, but everybody knows the picky eater. They're not that much fun at dinner parties. And any creative types, it's super fun to pair them with like non-creative types. You know what I mean? It's fun to get a couple lawyers and a couple painters at a table. You want to mix and match the guest list. It provides for a super fun evening. If everybody isn't, like, if you get 6 or 7 real estate agents around the table, where do you think the conversation goes, right? Whereas if you get a bunch of people that have varying backgrounds, it's a lot more fun. So that's the first part of what we're calling the guide to throwing a kick-ass dinner party. And those are 6 simple tips. 3x the ice. Buy 3 times the amount of ice you think you're going to need. Have couples sit next to each other, not across. Set an odd time of arrival, like 7:10 p.m. Braise is your friend. Braising is your friend. Searing is not. Doing anything at the last second is not. Number 5 would be the interactive dishes win, the tacos and the interactive sundaes and the bagel bar and the hamburger bar. And number 6, mix up the guest list. Throw some variety in there. Mix and match. Invite your crazy eccentric friend, but then also invite, maybe the more subdued librarian, or I don't know who you have in your friendship Rolodex, but mix up the guest list. So those are 6 easy tips. I'm Reggie. I'm a co-founder of Mantry. I want to thank you for joining us for this podcast. We're going to keep doing these things, and you can find them on our SoundCloud, and we're also going to put them on YouTube. And when we get around to it, we'll build out, a way to download them on Apple and that type of thing and give it a more centralized home. But for now, thanks for listening, and good luck cooking.